Hello, everyone, and welcome. I am so pleased to be here with you tonight. You are in the live immigration Q&A hosted by Devant and sponsored by CIBC. The topic for this evening is how to get Canadian permanent residence with a low express entry score. We have a very large group tonight, lots of great information. So let's begin. Next slide, please. It's so nice to meet you all. I'm here as your moderator. My name is Sisha Maharaj. I'm a senior consultant, business development with Devant, and I'll also be your moderator. Our guest and expert speaker this evening is Elizabeth Long, barrister, solicitor, and partner. And for those of you who have not met Elizabeth yet, well, I'll give you a little bit of a bio in a minute. But before we begin, I'd also like to acknowledge the lands on which we are situated this evening for the Indigenous community and the Native community. I want to also acknowledge that we are very fortunate and we share the space with our Indigenous and Métis community. And for me, I'm calling this webinar from Durham, and I'm very grateful to be sharing the space with you all this evening. Next slide, please, Elizabeth. Great. So just some logistics before we get started. You are all muted because of the size of the group this evening. There's no need to use your video. However, you can absolutely put your questions in the chat. This session is being recorded. You will be sent the recording after as a reference, so not to worry about taking lots of notes. We will share the video with you. I'm going to ask, because we have a large group, please post your questions in the Q&A function, and I will sort through your questions up as it is being received. And this is important because I'm going to try to get through as many questions as we can. I know that a lot of students are very interested in newcomers and how they can improve their chances to get PR. So we've had a lot of good responses so far for this session. Also wanted to let you know I will be sharing future events, which will be listed on our Devant website as well. So let's begin. Next slide, please. Oh, let's go to your introduction. Oh, there we go, Devant. Yep, let's go to the Devant slide. Great. So just for some of you who are new to Devant, Devant helps over 48,000 international students and newcomers to get hired in Canada. We offer free actionable advice from career coaches and industry experts at our live events. And we have the latest AI-driven tools to polish your resume, your interview skills, and labor market knowledge. And then finally, we help bridge connections to partners and employers to aid your immigration, academic life, and career development. I also want to mention that many of you are joining us from universities and colleges across Canada, over 100 universities and colleges. So please make sure to reach out to your International Student Center and your Career Services Center, who all offer free services for you to support you, including career coaching, interview support, and resume support. Now let's move on to our expert speaker, Elizabeth Long. Elizabeth Long is a leading immigration lawyer in Canada. She's an active advocate of immigrant and refugee rights and frequently presents and advertises on immigration issues to organizations, universities, members of parliament, unions, and the media. She has also testified several times before the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration on various immigration policies. Elizabeth holds a Juris Doctor law degree from the University of Toronto and a Bachelor of Arts degree with honors in psychology from Memorial University of Newfoundland. She also holds a Master of Law degree from Osgoode Hall Law School, York University, where she focuses on the intersection between immigration and labor and employment law from foreign workers. Elizabeth has been certified by the Law Society of Ontario as a specialist in citizenship and immigration law, a prestigious list on which only 65 lawyers in Canada belong. Elizabeth speaks both English and Mandarin. I also want to acknowledge our CIBC rep and sponsor who's here with us today. Some of them are here virtually in the chat. And Aisha Kazi is here with us in person, and you'll get to talk to her a little bit later on after the webinar. So welcome, Aisha, and thanks again, CIBC, for sponsoring this important, timely event for our students and newcomers to learn about how to improve their chances to get PR and boost their express entry points. So Elizabeth, the floor is yours. Thank you so much again for being here during this really, really changing times in immigration for newcomers. Over to you.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me here today. It's always a pleasure to be here with you. And absolutely, right now we have very, very challenging times. It looks like the government is trying to reduce the number of temporary residents in Canada. And there aren't that many spots for permanent residents. So today I'm going to speak to you guys about some of the things that you can do right now to try to get permanent residence if your express entry points are not enough. And also, we're going to talk about some of the ways that you might be able to extend your work permit in Canada as well. So, just wanted to talk a little bit about express entry. What does the system actually do? What is it? So just to give you a brief overview, in order to apply for permanent residence through express entry, first you need to create an online profile, and you are able to create an online profile if you qualify under one of three categories: the Federal Skilled Worker class, Canadian Experience class, and the Federal Skilled Trades class. And then you can enter into the express entry pool, and you can be in the pool for 1 year. If you don't get selected, then you're kicked out of the pool. So, a lot of people say, well, I've applied for a permanent residence. I just haven't received an invitation to apply yet. That is actually not correct. If you've entered the express entry pool, you have not applied for anything yet. You have just expressed that you're interested in applying and you might qualify to apply. It's when you get into the pool, you'll get a series of points based on your background and also if you have provincial nomination. And the government, every few weeks or so, maybe every 2 weeks or so, normally, will go through the system and they might select you based on your points. And there are category-based draws now. They also might select on how you had qualified to enter the pool, okay? And so it's not until you get that ITA, that invitation to apply, that you can actually submit your application. So what are some of the points that gives you, what are some of the factors that give you those points? First of all, age. If you are in your 30s and 40s, every time you have a birthday in your 30s, it's no longer going to be a happy birthday. Every time you age, it's -5, -6. In your 40s, it's a fast slide, -10, -11 points. And by the time you reach your 45th birthday, the thing is you don't have to worry about age anymore, but you don't have any points, 0 points for age, compared to someone in their 20s that's just who gets 100 or 110 points. That's a significant difference. Education, if you have a 3-year program that you've completed and another program on top, that gives you a huge jump in the points. Language is probably one of the biggest factors in differentiating whether someone can get an ITA or not. And normally right now, since it's so competitive, we're in general looking at people who might be able to get a CLB 9s. So for CELPIPs, you're looking at 7s in reading, writing, and speaking, 8 in listening. In CELPIP, it would be 9s, okay? Relevant Canadian work experience. That's work experience that you have in Canada when you are not a full-time student. And it's at least 30 times 52 weeks. So 1,560 hours in one entire year. That's counted as the minimum for the points. And you have to be employed by a Canadian based employer. So employed means that you're not self-employed, you're not a contractor. Not that you don't have a contract. A contractor is something where, let's say I hire someone to paint my house. Well, that person brings in their own tools. I'm not deducting any taxes from their pay. They say, okay, $5,000 to paint your house. I say, okay, here's 5,000, and that's it. That's a contractor. So if you have an employer who comes to you and says, okay, you know what, you just go and pay your own taxes. I don't want to bother my accountant. I'm just going to give you, let's say, whatever, $1,000 per week, and you can work for me. That then could very well be deemed to be self-employed, and you wouldn't get your work experience points. So make sure you get a T4, make sure you have your EI, CPP, income tax deducted from your pay stubs. Foreign work experience. If you have any overseas work experience, including remote work experience that you have while you're in Canada. So for example, if you are working for a employer outside of Canada, and that employer is located outside of Canada, you're working for them remotely while you're living in Canada, that counts towards foreign work experience. And that could be very significant. Spouses, education, language, Canadian work experience is important as well. And then we have provincial nominee programs. I'm going to be talking about the Ontario's provincial nominee program, that's added on top of the express entry post. If you receive a notification of interest, we can apply for 600 points. That's added to the express entry points that you normally would have, which basically assures that you get invited to apply. Now, please note that it's not all provincial nominee programs that can be give you 600 points. It has to be express entry linked. Previous study in Canada, you will certainly get points for that, depending on as long as public school. And then arranged employment points. And this is where we're going to be talking about work permits, because on your post-grad work permit, you do not get arranged employment. You can only get arranged employment if you have an employer-specific work permit or LMIA, and you have a job offer for at least 1 year after you get permanent residence. So normally we're looking at least permanent job offer, or at least maybe 18 to 24 months for the job offer. And siblings who are Canadians or permanent residents in Canada, you get some points. Fluency in French. French is a huge factor right now. So if you have French ability, or you think you can study and get to that CLB 7 level for French, that's a good way to do it. And trade certification, that's for people in the trades like the Red Seals. All right, so we have those points, and then the government also instituted category-based draws as well last year. So category-based draws are draws where you have the French language proficiency. So if people who have a French language level of CLB 7 are able, there's special draws for people in these kind of groups. And there's all sorts of occupations: healthcare, STEM, trade, transport occupations, agriculture, and agri-foods occupation. I've included a link here. We'll send out the slides to you and you can take a look. So if you have 6 months of work experience in the last 3 years in one of these occupations, or if you have French language proficiency, that could give you an edge, because the government will every few months have a draw where it's only people who are in these occupations or in the French draws that they will look at inviting, and therefore the points are going to be much lower than the general draws. I wanted to also talk about the OIMP Express Entry streams, which is the Ontario's provincial nominee programs. So provincial nominee programs differ in every province. The Ontario one requires you first to just be in the pool. You can't apply directly with them, okay? You have to just be in the pool and see if they give you a notification of interest. And there are 3 categories. The human capital stream, you must have a bachelor's degree or higher. They are having some exceptions right now for the nursing, some of the nursing occupations, but you have to have, but otherwise, you stay in the pool and they might invite you to apply, for example, with tech occupations. They've already indicated that they like tech occupations. They've been also inviting a lot of other kinds of occupations, health draws. There was a last draw just a few days ago where they invited a whole bunch of other kinds of occupations that they identified as well. French speakers as well. Again, they have French draws, but sometimes now they've also put occupations in these French draws as well. And then skilled trades. So if you are in the construction trades or bakers, you could have, and you have 1 year of work experience in Ontario with a valid work permit, then you could also apply, they could also select you to apply. And again, the points, they still go by points usually, but the points are much lower for these categories in which they invite you to apply. And if they invite you to apply and you submit your application and you get your provincial nomination, you will get 600 points added to your your express entry points, which basically assures that you're going to get an invitation to apply. Now, here's some summary points on what to do if your points are not high enough for express entry. First of all, it's all about planning, okay? If you come to me, I can basically tell you what your current points might be. We can estimate, especially if you have your language scores, but I can also tell you how you might be able to improve your score. For example, the work experience that you have in Canada or outside of Canada, increasing your language score. Sometimes that 0.5 on a difference on an IELTS exam could mean the difference between 90 points, believe it or not. Okay, so it just depends on your language tests. Sometimes your education, you might go and do another program, and that will give you that extra boost. Arranged employment, we're going to be talking about this, but getting an LMIA or other kinds of employer-specific work permits can get you 50 points for arranged employment. There are also other kinds of, the category-based draws. For example, sometimes being a truck driver for 6 months will get you invited to apply much more easily than other jobs, right? Increasing your French points if you do have that French level, or if you're able to learn a language faster. And then qualifying under one of the provincial nominee programs, like the OIMP as well. But, you'd have to just see if you can make sure that your occupations are one of the occupations that they like, etc., and how we put you into the express entry pool. Okay. Then we can look at alternatives to permanent residence. Today, I don't have time to get into all the other kinds of permanent residence programs, but there are quite a lot of different kinds of provincial nominee programs, for example, that are not express entry based that we can take a look at. Entrepreneurs as well. If you want to start your own business, before you do that, make sure you have a consultation on what you can do, because first of all, your work experience as self-employed people are not going to count towards a Canadian work experience. However, you might be able to qualify under the startup visa program, or you might be able to get an entrepreneur work permit, which is an employer-specific work permit. And if you work there, and you were actually at the executive management level, you could get even 200 points for express entry. Now, we have other programs like the caregiver program, which currently is not open, that we might take a look at. There are also other programs in specific areas like the Atlantic Immigrant Program or the RCIP, the Rural and Community Immigrant Program, which is a program where it's going to come into place soon, especially in communities that participated in the previous RNIP program, a lot of the cities in the Northern Ontario and other cities as well probably will also be eligible for this program. And these are programs where it's community-based, and in general, you want to have a job offer in one of these communities. Okay, so what I tell you guys today is true today, but the way that the law works, it's changing very rapidly. And in fact, by tomorrow, the government will make a huge announcement about the actual rules for the low wage LMIAs that they are changing. They've already announced that they're making those changes, but how they're applying, what they're going to apply to, that's going to change tomorrow. And then the post-grad work permits are going to change. Spousal work permits are going to change. The only way that we're able to keep you apprised of some of the important changes that might affect you is to send out announcements and news announcements. So we're going to have you sign up. We're going to put you on the list for these news announcements. And hopefully you like them. If you don't, you can certainly unsubscribe as well. Okay. And then in terms of your current situation, you want to keep status in Canada as long as you can. And this is where we're going to talk about as well. So first of all, if you haven't applied for postgrad work permit yet, you want to make sure that you can try to get a postgrad work permit for as long as you need to. Okay, so first, come for a consultation. Some people might be fine with just a 1-year postgrad work permit, but there are many people who will likely need the full 3-year postgrad work permit in order to have a good chance to be able to immigrate. So if you're only going to get a 1-year postgrad work permit, before you actually apply for that, come and speak with us and see if that is indeed the best option. Okay? Because you might need to plan on how you could extend your work permit beyond the postgrad work permit, which we're going to talk a little bit about. And you can also try to team up with your spouse. So for example, if you had your postgrad work permit and your spouse had their spousal work permit, and then your spouse can go and do another program, and you can get a spousal work permit, that might be an option depending on your circumstances as well. All right, so let's talk a little bit about how to extend your work permit beyond your postgrad work permit, okay? Before your postgrad work permit expires. So first of all, I want to tell you guys about implied or maintained status. When you file a work permit extension before your current work permit expires, you have the legal right to remain in Canada and continue working based on the conditions of the origin of the first work permit until a decision is made, okay? As long as the application is submitted properly. What do I mean by the application is submitted properly? It means you filed the right fees, you filed the right forms, and you press the button and the system actually said that you submitted the application, okay? Now, because if you didn't do any of those 3 things, it's as if you never submitted at all. If your application is returned because wrong fees, wrong application form, etc., then it's as if you never submitted at all, and you wouldn't have had the implied status. Your status would have ended on the date that your work permit expires. Okay, the IRCC website says in some places that you should apply 30 days before. That is not the law. That's a recommendation. As long as you file the application before it expires, even if it's on the day of. I generally don't like to submit it on the day of because the system might crash, etc. But even if it was, you can continue to work until a decision is made. Okay, but the day after is when you don't have status and you lose your status. You might be able to file a restoration of status within 90 days of losing your status, but you can't work until you get your decision on your restoration of status. So it's very, very important that you make sure you know what that expiry date is, and you make sure that you file that extension before your work permit expires, okay? Now, implied status is also lost when you leave Canada. So right now, for example, the work permits take, let's say, 4 months to process. Okay. If you say, oh, you know what, I really want to go home for Christmas, I'm just going to leave, right? And whatever, I'll just tell them afterwards I want to come back. Guess what? If you leave, and even if you have a visa to come back, or even if you don't need a visa and you just enter the country, you would not be allowed to work anymore inside the country. If you don't even have a visa, forget about even entering the country. Okay. So make sure that if you're on implied status, that you know that if you leave, you lose that status. So for the most part, you may want to stay in Canada until a decision is made. And finally, one of my biggest pet peeves with the government is that they send out this work permit extent letter, okay? And people think, and it says on here, you have status until such a random date that they put on there, or until a decision is made, whichever comes first, okay? And a lot of people have been saying to me, oh, I got a temporary authorization to work because I got this. I got a temporary visa. I got a temporary. This letter gives no status whatsoever. This letter is just issued by the government where they thought it was a good idea to give you a letter so that you can show OHIP so you can extend your health care. Okay, you can show your employer so that they're assured that you can continue to work. But without this letter, you still have status. And guess what? This letter is also very misleading because that random date that they put on there doesn't mean anything. That random date, if you don't have a decision after that random date, you still have the ability to stay in Canada and work because it's ingrained in the regulations of immigration. That's what gives you status, not this random letter. Okay, this letter just serves as a way for you to get OHIP in the meantime while you're waiting for your work permit. And if you don't have that letter and you meet all the conditions, you still have maintained status. You still have the ability to continue in Canada and work. Now, I'm just showing you a chart. This is a sample of different kinds of work permits that you can get in Canada. There are the open work permits, postgrad work permits, spousal work permits, etc., and the employer-specific. And the employer-specific work permits, they're divided into the LMIA work permits or the International Mobility Program, IMP work permits. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about open work permits. First of all, there is your bridging work permit, and these are the work permits that you get if you have received an acknowledgement of receipt, or in some cases, an approval in principle for permanent residence. And so, for example, if you are going through the express entry stream, you've received an invitation to apply, you've submitted your application, a few minutes later, you'll get a letter saying acknowledgement of receipt. With that letter, you can then apply for a bridging work permit to allow, which gives you 1 year open work permit until it's kind of to allow you to continue to be in Canada and work until a decision is made. Okay. If you have a spouse, now spousal work permits are going to change. The government has already announced that they're going to change it for those for where the occupations of the principal applicant is in these management or professional, which I normally means tier 0 and 1. They had said that it's for LMIA and IMP. We don't know if they're going to also apply that to the postgrad work permits. So we don't know when exactly that rule is going to come into place. And again, there's a lot of unknowns about that, but it may be coming. In the meantime, you are able to apply for spousal work permits for those people who are married and those people who are in common law relationships. So common law relationships are relationships where you have lived together with that person for at least 1 year. And one of the things that you two things I want to comment about common law relationships. Number one, if you have lived together for 1 year, you are common law. Don't pretend that you're not, especially on the forms where they always ask you about your marital status. If you say that you don't have a common law spouse, but you have a common law spouse, later on, you could be cited for misrepresentation, which carries with it a penalty of 5-year ban. And also, you could be barred from sponsoring your spouse afterwards as well. So if you have a spouse, make sure that you declare whether or not they're married or common law. Okay. Number two, you should also start collecting your evidence, your joint lease, your joint bank statements, insurance documents, documents to show that you have the same address sent, the different bills sent to the same address, etc. Okay, because you do need to have that evidence. It's not the same as a marriage certificate for married people, right? For the IEC working holiday work permits, these are work permits for people from certain countries, and it's depending on the country, it could be people under the age of 30 or 35, where you are able to apply for open work permits. And it's a lottery, but a lot of times you put yourself in, and they'll tell you whether or not how many people are in the pool, whether or not your chances are good. So I've included a link here that you can actually click on to see if your country of nationality belongs to it. I will let you know that, for the top 3 countries, India, Philippines, and China, that's not part of the IEC work permits. There's a lot of European, some Korean, Japan, Taiwan, and a lot of South American countries. Well, some South American countries. Chile is one of them. Australia is a big one as well. Okay. All right. Then we talk about one of the most important things, which is employer-specific work permits, because these kind of work permits, even if your work permit hasn't expired yet, it may be worth it for you guys to apply because they could give you arranged employment points, okay? So for LMIAs, these are applications that are done by the employer where normally they have to recruit Canadians and show they can't find any Canadians to do the job. Now, the government has recently announced that by September 26th, which is tomorrow, there are going to be severe restrictions for low-wage workers. And for the most part, unless you belong to one of the industries, you probably wouldn't be able to get a low-wage LMIA. If your wages are below the median wage for the province, which is around $28 or $29 an hour, depending on the province. Okay. If your wages are above that, there is still a possibility that we can apply for the LMIAs. And also, one of my favorite LMIAs to do is through the global talent stream. So these are for certain occupations in the STEM categories where the employer does not have to recruit, and the processing time is around 2 weeks processing time. However, the employer does have to provide what's called a labor market benefit plan, where they have to show that they're going to create at least 3 labor market benefits. So these are kind of applications that it's an employer-based program. I'm going to say 2 things. One, there's a certain way you can approach employers about this. We did a whole program a few months ago. It should be on the YouTube site for Devant, where we kind of talk to you guys give you some advice on how to talk to employers about helping you with permanent residence, helping you with extending these work permits. The second thing is, do not go around buying LMIAs. It is completely illegal for an employer or a recruiter or a consultant to sell you an LMIA. Fees for LMIAs are not to be charged to workers. They are to be charged only to the employers, including legal fees as well. Okay. So be very aware of that. All right. Another category that we tend to apply for is the free trade agreement professionals. And so these are programs, again, for people from certain countries. So we have a lot of countries with free trade agreements in South America, for example, Chile, Peru, Colombia, Panama is one of those as well. And then we have free trade agreements with Australia, Japan, Mexico, US. Also, we have free trade agreements with the UK and EU. And so if you are a national of one of these countries and you have a job offer, it depends on the free trade agreement. That is, sometimes it's the O or A category. It depends on which country it is. We could, and sometimes for the one or even the two or three, but it depends on the free trade agreement. We may be able to get you a work permit that's LMIA exempt, where the employer just registers the offer of employment and we go and apply for you. Another one that I really like is the Francophone work permit. Now, the Francophone work permit only requires the person to speak and listen to a CLB 5 level, which is much lower than the express entry one, which is 7. CLB 5 and only speak and listen, and you can get a work permit for any job outside of Quebec. It doesn't matter what the tier is, could be any job. Certainly, high skilled ones will help you get permanent residence, but it could be for any job. For if you work for a religious or charitable organization, we might be able to get a work permit for you then. Significant benefits, especially for situations where your work impacts the the health and welfare of the country, or if you're going to make a significant cultural contribution as well to Canada, we may be able to get you a work permit there. The IEC Young Professionals, again, this is like the working holiday work permit, except if you have a job offer, we can apply for Young Professionals work permit for you, which again is an employer-specific work permit. And there's such thing as a reciprocal agreement work permit. So if you work for a multinational company that also sends Canadians abroad to work elsewhere, we may be able to get you a work permit as well under their global mobility agreement. So what I wanted to just finally, end up with is the LMIAs. As soon as you get an LMIA and you get a work permit based on the LMIA, or you have LMIA supporting PR, you get your points there. With regard to the other ones, and I also wanted to mention there's an entrepreneur work permit as well. If you open up your own business and you own at least and control the business as well, then we might be able to get your work permit. All these other work permits, you have to get the work permit and have worked in the business for at least a year before you can get your arranged employment points. Okay. All right. So I've talked a lot now, and we have a lot of questions as well. So,
Yes. Wow. So Elizabeth, wow, that was absolutely incredible. Please, I hope you have some water there to take a drink of water, because I really appreciate your expertise and pulling this together so quickly for everyone. We have almost 60 questions in the queue, so I'm going to try to sort through them so that we can get to as many as possible. I do want to thank everyone so much for your questions. Just a reminder, please put your questions for Elizabeth in the Q&A feature. It's right next to the chat, just because I need to be able to sort them for you and try to get to as many as we can. I will also say Elizabeth is willing to stay a little bit longer so that we can try to get through as many questions as possible. So please bear with us. We're going to try to get through all the questions. And I also just want to say something quick to you all, that I know that there's a lot happening, a lot of changes that are happening, and it's an uncertain time. But I want to let you know that you have a community of support here. You have Devont, you've got the legal profession and immigration lawyers and experts like Elizabeth Long and Long and Mangle are here to support you, as well as, financial services company CIBC, who is here and sponsoring this important discussion. So I just want to give you a word of encouragement that you please make sure you seek assistance and you seek guidance, and please don't wait until it's very late to your time, because as Elizabeth mentioned, you want to make sure that you are in status and that you understand where you're at. So please make sure that you take action early to get assistance where you need it. Okay. So Elizabeth, I'm going to
Yes,
jump
sure.
right in.
Also say, we're probably not going to get through all of your questions today, and especially the questions where it really pertains to your own personal situation. We probably won't be answering those because of the fact that A, it's not private in this session, and B, in this kind of situation, we really want to have a personal consultation with you. So that being said, we are offering anyone who is coming from Devont a student discount for consultations with us. It's $100. We'll do a Zoom call or Teams call or something online with you guys. And we can then go through your own personal plan for you. Okay.
Great.
So in general, we're just going to be answering some general questions that can help you, all of you, on this.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that, Elizabeth. And I will also mention we will be sending you a follow-up email with resources, links, and details. And yes, the recording will be shared as well. Okay. So let's start from the beginning. I'm going to try and ask the most general that can relate to the most individuals who are here. So I have a question here for you, Elizabeth. Does working hours as a supply early childhood assistant on call, not a part-time or full-time contract, count towards eligible hours for PR?
So something like this, where you are an employee, you're not, you're getting your CPP, and income tax deducted from you. That counts as Canadian work experience for express entry. And this is a high skilled job as well. So yes, that would count.
Okay, so I think the question is, if it's a freelance work, it could still count.
Freelance work where you are not an employee would not count towards Canadian work experience. So this one is a supply. It's not a part or full-time contract. See, having a contract doesn't necessarily mean that you're a contractor or an employee. It really depends on how your wages are deducted. So if you get your wage, even if you're a part-time worker, you could still accumulate your hours. I'm not sure. So freelance work does not necessarily count if you don't get your CPPEI income tax deducted from it. Yeah.
Okay, so it depends on how they're actually payrolled.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Okay. And if you're not sure, this is where I would encourage you to reach out to Elizabeth and set up a call. Okay. I have another really good question. What options does a temporary resident have if their employer refuses to submit the employer form for provincial nomination?
Right. So this is something where, and I certainly refer you to our session that we did where we specifically talked about the OIMP and the employer-based applications. Uh, and Sisha, all of these webinars are on the Devont YouTube site,
Yes.
right? Okay.
Yes.
And so, the OIMP employer-based program is not meant for individuals just to be able to apply. The Ontario government, and we have regular meetings as I'm part of the Ontario Bar Association with the Ontario government. They have told us specifically that the Ontario program for employers is for the benefit of employers. And so it is a program where you are supposed to get the permission of the employer before you even put yourself into the pool. And nothing is more disconcerting, I think, to a lot of employers than if you get an invitation to apply and then you approach them and say, hey, you have 14 days to give me this form. I can see a lot of employers where they have this, they back against the wall saying, wait, I don't know what this is. Why am I going to support you? So a lot of it is a way to speak to the employer. But if they don't want to give you that form, then you don't have a choice to apply for that program. You may want to look for another program to do.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Elizabeth. So I have a general question, which I think can help everyone. Can you please explain the international student stream? Is it like LMIA?
So the International Student Stream is one of the OINP employer-based programs. And that is not a LMIA. LMIA is where the employer is trying to, they have to normally advertise so they can't find a Canadian to do the job. The International Student Stream, the employer does not have to do that. The employer has to support you by submitting the employer form, and normally we have also letters and etc. that they to explain the situation. Okay, I can't explain the entire program. We do have other sessions where we go into what these provincial nominee programs are all about.
Okay, thank you. So I have a question here from someone who says, I have 1 year's experience of insurance back in India, and I'm currently working as a marketing intern for a non-for-profit in Sault Ste. Marie. What are my chances at express entry? If not, are there other options I should be looking at?
This person needs to come for a consultation because there are all
Okay.
sorts of things that could happen, but I would need to see. For
Okay.
example, maybe there might be a charitable work permit for this person, or maybe this
Okay.
person might qualify for RNIP or OIMP or express entry. But there's all sorts of
Many others.
possibilities. So do come for a consult.
Come for a consult. Okay, thank you. I hope I get this acronym okay. Someone is asking, what options do I have for CUAET visa holders,
Mm-hmm.
especially the non-Ukrainians who have Ukrainian spouses?
Mm-hmm.
Does the PR application have to be tied to the Ukrainian spouse? Common law.
Right. So absolutely not. These QAT work permits, Iranian work permits, all these humanitarian work permits that were issued, um, they give you the open work permits and you're allowed to work in Canada. But to qualify for permanent residence, you still have to go through the normal permanent residence options. And so even if you're a spouse of a Ukrainian person, you qualify for express entry based on your own right. You qualify for OIMP based on your own right. Your spouse, if they want to get permanent residence, has to be based on their own economic background, not on nationality.
Wonderful. Thanks for that clarification. I think you answered this one already, but I'm going to check and see. This person is from Toronto, currently working as a CNC machinist in a company. What would the next process be if this person is working 6 months in that company already?
Um, hey, that's interesting. We probably should have a consult.
Okay.
CNC machinist, I believe I'll have to double check to see what tier it is. But there are, if it's an in-demand stream, if it's a low skilled, there is certain programs in Ontario where, especially if you are working outside of the GTA for a on certain manufacturing occupations for 9 months, you might qualify for in-demand stream. Otherwise, if it's high skilled in a construction trade, we can look at different scenarios for that, like skilled trades or the skilled trades, OIMP, etc. So do come for
Okay.
consult.
Come for a consult. Okay, great. I think this will be a good general question, just for clarity. So
Mhm.
based on the new IRCC announcements, is it likely that existing students who are in Canada will be exempt from the labor market alignment of the postgrad work permit?
The labor market alignment of the postgrad work permit. So basically, the government had announced that they are going to be changing the postgrad work permit. We don't know exactly what these rules are going to be. They had last week said something like, postgrad work permit holders of who graduate, students who graduate from colleges with where the studies are related to occupations in long-term need will still be able to get a 3-year work permit. So what does that
Okay.
mean? Still, what about the other people? How do you know if your study is related to occupation in demand? And
Mm-hmm.
again, like this person said, what if I was already a student? Where does the
Mm-hmm.
cutoff come from? So all of these questions are good questions that we don't know exactly yet.
Okay.
We are going to put you guys on that newsletter that I said before. Once we
Mm-hmm.
know about what these rules are, we'll send out some news, and I think, Devont, we probably will have another session
I
for you
think,
guys as well about that.
okay. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Thank you. So this is a personal question, but I'm going to try to generalize just so that this way it can be more relevant to everyone here. So we've got a question here, like what if the employer doesn't meet the OINP requirements, and which means they need to have 5 full-time staff and $1 million in revenue,
Mhm.
but they do have a bachelor's, in electronics or communication engineering, but no related experience.
Yeah.
But has graduated from a wireless information networking course. So no experience,
Yeah.
but has graduated in an academic program in wireless information networking. Is
Yeah.
there anywhere their employer can still help them if if the employer does not meet the OINP requirements?
We'll have to take a look. The person looks like it also said that they're working as a line cook, I believe, as well. Uh,
Yes.
really, we'll have to take a look at the different scenarios, your background, what we can do in the situation. The government has announced that the low wage LMIAs are not going to be available for most people except for those responsible for food preparation or something of that sort. Does that mean it includes cooks? Cooks are exempt? We don't know yet. So tomorrow,
Okay.
once they make an announcement as to what finally the rules are, we will also
Okay.
put out a info on that. Yeah.
Info. Okay. And so, Elizabeth, just for clarity, if they're already in the country,
Mhm.
and they had already sort of submitted their documents, the announcement tomorrow, does that mean that that they would be like grandfathered, or does it mean
Yeah.
whatever they announce tomorrow, that's going to be the new rule going forward for everybody?
So that's going to be the new rule going forward for anyone who has not already submitted an LMIA on or
Okay,
before that date. Yeah, tomorrow. Yeah.
perfect. Okay. So if you are somebody who has already submitted an LMIA,
Mhm.
like today or earlier,
Yeah.
tomorrow's announcement, it would not apply. It would only be if for people going forward from September 26th onwards for the
Yes.
low wage rule. Okay.
Yes. So
Okay.
it also bears some thinking that, if you're lucky enough to have submitted that LMIA, it better be fully compliant, because these LMIAs now take 8 months or not to be evaluated and to wait. And so if by the end of 8 months there's something deficient in the application and it gets rejected, then you're back to square one as well. So make
Oh,
sure,
okay.
if your employer did it themselves, there's a high chance that they didn't do it properly. We can certainly do some audits and just take a look and review the
Okay.
application, make sure that it's done properly.
Okay, that's a good point. The audits as well is very useful. Thank you. So I have a question here, which I think is interesting. Hi, I'm wondering if I'm in Canada, but I work full-time or part-time for a foreign company. Would
Mhm.
that count toward my foreign work experience? If yes, what sort of document should be included as proof?
Okay. So yes, if you are working remotely for a foreign company outside of Canada, then that could count towards foreign work experience points for express entry. As to the documentation, it's the similar documentation that we normally give for foreign work experience. We normally have the letter that we draft for the employer, that's number one, to
Mhm.
outline the conditions of work. But then we take a look at other things that you might have, pay stubs, contracts, etc.
Mhm. And just want to clarify to students as well. Thank you, Elizabeth, for that. That Elizabeth can help your employer if they don't have a lawyer and they need assistance with documents. You can also put them in touch with Elizabeth as well. So next question is, can a tier 4 or tier 5 job like a barista or server full-time help me get permanent residency in Ontario?
Likely not. As a barista, it's not an occupation in demand. So for express entry, we're looking at high skilled work experience, tier 0, 1, 2, or 3. If you're a supervisor, that's high skilled. But if you are not, then likely that's not going to give you much of an advantage with regard to PR.
Okay. Will Canadian co-op work experience be counted when applying through the FSW? And can you tell us what is FSW for those that don't know?
The Forest Skilled Worker Program is something where, yes, you can have work experience uh, so that you can put yourself into the pool. So, for example, if someone has worked for at least 1 year continuously in one occupation anywhere in the world, including in Canada, including when you're a student. And we do a lot of PhDs. We used to put a lot of PhD students or who did RATA or master students. We can enter you into that pool if you have, even if you don't have any other kind of work experience. But just because you entered the pool, remember, you didn't apply just because you entered into the pool. And so right now, with those points being so high, unless you had some other occupation in one of those occupations, particular occupations, or unless you can speak French fluently, etc., because those points don't count towards the Canadian work experience, you may not have enough points to get invited to apply. So certainly come for a consultation and we can see what we can do with your situation.
Okay, thank you. What is the recommended minimum CELPIP score for English to maximize one's language points?
Ah, that's a loaded question that I can't
Okay.
necessarily answer until I know what your permanent residence is, but your permanent resident options is. In general, for express entry, we like to see a CLB of 9, which is 9 in every single skill level, reading, writing, speaking, and listening. That's not to say that if you have lower than that, that you have no chance. It could be that you have certain other factors that can compensate.
Mhm.
We'll certainly have to take a look.
Okay, thank you. Can we use academic IELTS results instead of the general IELTS for our PR points?
No, you have to do your general. Yeah.
Okay. Under the OINP express entry, must the bachelor's degree be gotten in Canada?
No. So for the human capital stream that I spoke about, no, the bachelor's degree can be from anywhere.
Okay, thank you. Um, does working during school time count as work experience? I think you already covered this, but in
Yeah, I
case
think
there's someone.
yeah, I covered that
Yeah,
with it depends on what you
yes.
want to see. Yeah.
Okay. Is the trade certification important for well, this is a specific question for sheet metal workers. Um,
Mm.
I think that's a
Most of
very
the
specific
time, the
question.
trade certifications aren't issued. It's very hard to get those trade certifications from what I know with red seals, etc.
Okay.
For a lot of people, you may not need it, but again, I'll have to see what your situation is.
What are the requirements to apply in proficiency draw? Excuse me.
So you will have to pass a CLB level of 7 in every single one of your skill levels, reading, writing, listening, and speaking.
Okay, thank you. Can experience in Canada be the sum of different roles and tiers? Good question.
Sorry, can the say again?
So
What?
when they're counting your experience, is it okay if it's the total of different roles and different tiers?
Yes, depending on what you're talking about. If it is for the Canadian experience class, the work experience, yes, that is possible. You can mix and match as long as they're high skilled and as long as you've been employed in every single position.
Okay. So two parts. Does 1 year of experience back home help me for PR?
Yes, you do get significant points for having foreign work experience. So for those of you who don't have foreign work experience, but you're able to find a job working remotely for someone outside of the country, that might be a good idea.
Okay. And if an international student wants to get married to someone back home, will that impact their process?
So it really depends on the number of points that we can have for you as a married spouse. Um, the IRCC now, they have been really cracking down on people who, even though they have a spouse, they say that that person is not accompanying them, when in fact that person will want to get permanent residence and be accompanying them. And they are saying in those cases that this could be misrepresentation. So we do have to take a look at your situation. And
Okay.
sometimes, perhaps, before you do get married, come for a consultation so that we can see whether or not it's a good idea to do that before you get your permanent residence, or maybe you do that after you get your permanent residence.
Okay. Is it a good idea to withdraw your profile and express entry and start again?
Depends on the situation, depends on why you want to withdraw your application. You don't necessarily have to withdraw an application. You can always amend the information in an application as well.
Okay. Um, what is the maximum age of a foreign bachelor's degree for it to be considered valid for educational purposes for the first applicant and
It's not about the
spouse?
age of the degree, it's about the age of the ECA. So your education credential assessment is good for 5 years. Afterwards, you can apply again for another education credential assessment. But, even if you got your degree back in the 90s or 80s or whatnot, and the university is able to issue your transcripts, you're fine. You can, as long as you can get your ECA, you're good. Sometimes the issue with these is if your school no longer exists, or if the school doesn't have your records, then that could be an issue with getting the ECA.
Okay. I have a couple questions here that are quite personal to your circumstances. So again, I would encourage you, if you have specific questions, to reach out to Elizabeth. I have a question here. I have issues with my Express entry profile to updating it. What can I do to have that updated? I'm not really
Not sure.
understanding the
This might be a technical
question.
question that you might want to. This might be something that you may need to go and call the call center about. I rarely say
Yes.
call the call center, but these kind
Yeah,
of
but that,
settings, you call the call
yeah,
center.
yeah, I think so too. I'm just reading. I'm trying to get through them as quick as possible here. There's questions about, working hybrid in another country while living in Canada. Elizabeth has already answered that question. Um, do you know if the postgrad work permit changes can affect those who are already in Canada, or is it only for newcomers? I think you already answered that question on the low wage, but did you want to make another comment around
I
those who are already in Canada?
Yeah, I don't know, guys, what these changes are going to be. It's only anyone's guess. So
Mhm.
normally, I think if you already have a post-grad work permit, you can work based on it. Whether or not your spouse can get a spousal work permit based on the post-grad work permit, if they don't already have one. So if they don't have one yet and they are eligible, go and apply now before the rules change. Um, but after the rules change, I don't know about spousal work permits. And if you don't have a post-grad work permit yet, I don't know what those rules might be. So stay tuned. We are certainly going to, I think, have a session for you guys on these new changes to post-grad work permits once they are announced, and we can discuss that further.
Okay. And if you can remind people, if their post-grad work permit is about to expire, how can they extend it?
That's this latter half of my presentation. So
Yes.
rewind. It'll
Well,
be recorded.
maybe look at the
Rewind and watch.
recording. Okay, we'll do the
Yes.
recording. Okay. So we'll refer you to the recording to answer that question, if you missed that information. Okay. Um, just reading through them. Give me a minute here. Some of these questions she's already answered.
Mhm.
Okay, this is different. I'm an international student currently enrolled in bachelor's in computer science, but my brother is PR and soon to be a citizen. Can my brother basically help him, or will there be some benefit if I have a family member who's already a PR or citizen?
You get 15 points if you have a Canadian or permanent resident sibling for express entry. Um, Other than that, there isn't much. Sometimes, depending on whether you're under the age of 22 and your sibling is able to qualify for parental sponsorship and they're already in the pool, etc., you might be able to, but that's a very, very, very long shot. Probably that those situations don't apply. So it's really then the 15 points for siblings right now.
Okay, okay. And can you, I think you talked about this already, but the postgrad work permit, if they took a 2-year course, is it by default 3 years that they get?
Um, right now, a 2-year program at any public college or university, you get a 3-year. As
3 year,
to
okay.
whether or not that's going to be the in place when after the announcements, I don't know. What I would suggest you do is if you qualify right now, go and apply right now.
Okay. So this is an interesting question. If this person has like CLB 7 in French, CLB 6 in English, but they're interested in a French speaking skilled worker stream, how can I express this interest?
French speaking worker stream. I think it depends on what they're talking about. If they're talking about the OIMP uh, stream where it's express entry based, you don't express your interest. It's kind of like, you know that dating website Bumble, where
Yes.
where you have this like the guys can't contact the girls and the women have to make the first move. It's kind of like that. You guys are like the men, the government is like the women. You can only go and apply and contact them if they swipe right on you. And so if you're in the pool, you can just hope that they will swipe right on you. If they go and say, give you a swipe right, which means notification of interest, it's only then that you can go and apply with them. Otherwise,
Mhm.
you're just in the pool.
Okay. So that means you have to wait until you get that notification of interest from the government before you can apply.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I'm just reading through here. Okay, after graduation of college and applying for the postgrad work permit before they approve, can I leave Canada for a while? I think you already answered this question. Um,
So this is where you've graduated, you've applied for your postgrad work permit, right? And
mhm.
you want to go and travel. A lot of people want to do that. The question I would have if you came to me for a consult is when does your status end and when are you on implied status? If you are on implied status at that time, it probably wouldn't be a good idea to go and leave the country. If you can go and come back before your status ends, that might be okay. But it really depends because I'm sure you don't want to be waiting 4 months until you can actually start working for an employer.
Okay. Can we get a PR supporting LMIA if we're working for a government-funded corporation?
Yes, technically you can, as long as the employer is willing to do the LMIA.
Can one apply to be in the pool a second time if the first time the person did not get ITA?
Yeah, sure. You can re-enter yourself all the time. Anytime you want, you can re-enter yourself in the, but in the end, the question is, can you get an ITA? If you can't get an ITA, then, what's the point? So
Mhm.
before we ever, even, say, okay, we're going to put you in the pool, we want you to know what your chances are. Now, that being said, uh, the government can do odd things, and it sometimes, you know, I had this client once who the points were at 480s at that point. And we were looking at some scenarios and she had 416. And I was like, well, I don't know that the governments may go down that low. And she said, Elizabeth, my mother said, you can't win the lottery if you don't buy a lottery ticket. So put me into the pool. I said, fair enough. I'm going to put you into the pool. And wouldn't you know it, 2 weeks later, the government had this weird policy and their points shot down and she got invited to apply. So that's the one
Oh,
example I use, is that I don't know, as an immigration lawyer, I can just guess based on trends before where those
yes.
might be. But you never know. The government at one point had this straw during COVID time where they invited the lowest point was someone with 42. Now, if you had asked me before, would I have ever entered someone with 42 points? Probably I would say no. But, that person was lucky enough and they got invited to apply. We don't know
Mm,
what these
wow.
situations are, and sometimes my guesses could be wrong. Yeah.
hmm So it could be, there's hope, depending on where they are in the process or, where they have the needs, they could still be called or invited to apply. That's good news. Okay.
I always say hope for the best, but plan for the
For
worst.
the worst. Yes, I see that too. Mhm. All right. So in terms of the STEM occupations, does marketing fall under STEM?
uh they really look at the occupations. For they have a list of occupations. I don't think marketing consultant is one of those STEM occupations. That being said, for example, I think if you are a digital, I'll have to see, like, sometimes if you are on certain kinds of digital whatever, I can't remember the exact occupations, they might fall under certain occupations as well. It's not just about the occupation, what the position name is, it's about the duties as well. So
hmm
I wouldn't say that all marketing professions are not STEM, but for the most part, like a marketing consultant in that occupation, that's not a STEM occupation.
Okay. So what about if, thank you for that question and thank you for the answer, Elizabeth. If someone did their primary program or diploma in cybersecurity, but they also enrolled in a short course for a PSW, which is very different, it's healthcare. Does that help at all if they have the diversified experience from like technology to healthcare?
Um, it just depends on the work experience in the end. What kind of
Work
work
experience.
experience do you have in the
Okay.
end? Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Um, so since you mentioned that the implied status paper from IRCC is for an extension of OHIP, does that mean I can now renew my OHIP with that document? Does Service Ontario allow me to renew OHIP?
Service Ontario with OHIP in general, if you have that document, what I've heard, I don't help clients apply for OHIP, but what I've heard is that OHIP will accept that and give you the interim healthcare while you're waiting for the work permit.
Thank you. That's very important. Thank you. What are the requirements needed on the church or religious organization for it to qualify?
The charitable or religious worker, it's not just about the organization, it's about you, what you guys do. As a charitable worker, you have to be doing charitable work, direct charitable work, not just work that supports charity. So for example, they give an example as, if you're an accountant for the charity, that's not counted as charitable work. But if you're actually helping, people in poverty, or you're helping That's charitable work. Religious worker, you have to be doing the religious work. These are, if you are working for a religious or charitable organization and you might be doing some of this work, do come and talk to us. We may be able to get you a work permit under those categories. And because that's an employer-specific work permit, you could be then eligible for your arranged employment points.
Okay. Can I work 20 hours on my co-op work permit without the conditions authorized to work on or off campus?
Yes, you can work based on your co-op work permit, but the co-op work permit only allows you to work for work that is integral to your studies. That is the work that is part of a co-op program. You can't just use it to work in any job. That work permit only allows you to work for that. Now, if you wanted to work in other jobs, you can work if you are currently enrolled full-time as a student and you're a student and you can then work based on those hours. And we go through a lot of those discussions in some of our other seminars as well.
Yes, thank you. Can you please explain the 67 out of 100 point system under the FSW program? Will I be able to get PR if I have a minimum of 67 points under FSW program?
So the 67 points is just for you to be able to enter the pool. And you can enter the pool, that's great. But it's whether or not you're going to get an invitation to apply that matters in the end. So you might be able to enter the pool, but that's not to say that you can get that invitation to apply.
I'm just reading through the questions. Give me 1 minute. Does part-time work as a student count towards PR points?
Could be. It depends on which kind of but for example, for the Canadian experience class, for work experience in Canada for express entry, yes, we can count part-time hours.
Okay, great. Can you be in the PNP as well as the express entry?
Yes, you can. You can go parallel for these programs.
Okay. Okay.
So Sisha, it's 8:20. Let's make
All right. Yes.
how about we
Wow.
do
Yeah.
what
We're
what
almost, I'm just gonna read
yeah,
through the last couple
last question.
here.
Make it good. Make it good.
Make it last question. Okay, and then we'll do okay.
Or let's two. Let's do it two.
Well,
So
last
not so
two.
much,
Okay.
not so much
Okay.
pressure. Yeah.
Okay. I'm getting some questions around the cost. Why don't we just end there with the cost? I think it's $100, right? A discounted
That's
cost of $100, right?
plus tax. And people often ask, how long is it? Normally, we are able to get through all your questions in under half an hour. I kid you not. I've been doing this for 17 years. Well, no, more than that, almost 20 years. And most of the time, 95% of the time, we can get through it in half an hour. But if you need more time, for example, especially like you might want me to speak to your employer or, we follow up, it's all included in that fee. I don't charge more. Yeah.
Great, great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Can I ask you, if you don't mind, to go to the next slide for me? As we're wrapping up, I am going to just highlight, thank you guys so much for attending and asking your questions. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for extending your time with us today. Would love if you guys can let us know if this was useful, if we should continue having these sessions. We'd love to hear from you. We have a number of great events coming up after this. So our sponsor, CIBC, is offering another event next week. Wednesday, October the 2nd is Ask a Recruiter with CIBC and Kroll, which is a consulting company. We have October 9th, Resume Clinic with Devant Career Coaches. October 16th, Understanding the Canadian Job Market, also sponsored by CIBC. And then October 16th and 17th, We have our big virtual hiring expo, which is Get Hired at Home to help you get a job, connect with employers. Also, Elizabeth is hiring as well, a law clerk. So she will be there looking to hire someone and interviewing as well. So please make sure to register on our website for those events. I do appreciate all of your feedback. Thank you so much. Looks like we've got such great feedback, all very positive. I'm going to share the results with everyone. Again, I agree, it was just incredible, incredible. I also want to mention to you that we have a really great question from our sponsor. Very interested to see for the Get Hired at Home event. I'm just going to hit back. What are your financial goals as an international student or newcomer? Please let us know, like financially, for your financial goals. As I said, CIBC is sponsoring these 3 special events, and at Get Hired at Home, we will be looking to see if we should be doing something on financial literacy for you. So we'd love to hear from you. You know, are you looking to save for tuition and educational expenses? Are you looking to manage your daily expenses? Are you trying to build your credit history in Canada? You know, are you saving for future investments or a big purchase? And are you looking to get help to send money back home? And, you know, again, I wanted to thank CIBC for sponsoring this event and making this possible for us to offer these important and timely events for newcomers and international students. Really appreciate your feedback here. I see that a lot of individuals look like they're saving for future investments or big purchases, looking to save for tuition and educational expenses, as well as managing daily expenses. So please keep those answering those polls. I'm going to keep it up for another minute. And again, this is the Get Hired at Home event. So please join us. It's a free virtual hiring event for Canada's newcomers and international students. I'm also going to share Christopher's information in the chat. You'll also get a follow-up email. So if you have any questions that you're looking to get help with on financial banking or financial banking perks, for everyone who was here, we also have a link where you can find out about banking perks and newcomer supports through CIBC. And as I mentioned earlier, yeah, you can go to the next slide, Elizabeth. We offer a number of different services to help you. We offer one-on-one career coaching at Devant, LinkedIn audits, resume and cover letter support as well. So please visit our website. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation or the webinar, you all have free services through your university and colleges for international student support. So please make sure you take advantage of your college and university supports. We'll also be supplementing that for our community as well. Do we have one more slide there, Elizabeth? I think we've got another tool that we're introducing called Improved. So you can also take a look at that and get some free advice as well online. Next slide, Elizabeth. And then here is the slide for CIBC. So if you're interested in getting some free perks, taking a look at some banking services and banking products and banking perks to help you with your financial goals, please take a look at CIBC's contact here. You can scan that. And I think that's our last slide. Is there anything else that we've got for them?
No, you know what? I just wanted to say to you guys, it's a tough world out there. Absolutely. And the government is right now doing a lot of backpedaling on a lot of things that they did before. But I do want to encourage you guys to continue to strive. You guys are amazing people. There are certainly not that many people in this world who would do what you guys do, leave everything behind and come to a brand new country and do what you need to do. You know, I think we love hiring international students because we know that you guys are certainly tenacious and hardworking, and you guys will do and go beyond what a lot of Canadians won't do. And so I do want to encourage you guys to try whatever you can do to stay in this country, because our country is certainly great because of people like you.
Mm. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for sharing those words of encouragement. We're so fortunate to have a partner like you, an employer as well, working with Devant and supporting students. So everyone, please join me in thanking Elizabeth, for her time and her advice today. I am going to stay on just to save the chat and to save some of the questions. Please reach out to Elizabeth. You will get a follow-up email, how to contact and book some time with Elizabeth. We'll wait and see what the government has to say tomorrow with the announcements. And as I said, we will follow up probably in the fall once we know the impacts of the post-grad work permit. We will follow up to schedule another session with Elizabeth. As well, if you have employers that need assistance, you can also refer them to Elizabeth as well. If you need audits, forms, or documentation review, she can also help you and your employers in that way as well. So everyone have a good evening, all the best. I hope to see you at our future events. If you found this helpful, please tell your friends, and all the best to you. We'll see you soon. Good night, everyone.
Take care, everyone.
Bye, Elizabeth. Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Thank you.